Hi, folks, and welcome back to MMA Talking Heads. I'm your co-host, Jason Probst, and we're joined by the lovely and talented Meg May as our special co-host on this episode. Meg, how you doing?
Hey, Jason, how are you doing? I'm on the other coast. How's things going out there?
Well, it's sunny out here. It's a California Easter. It's a good 70 degrees. How's the weather out there?
No complaints. You're the only person I know that would tape a show on Easter. You're hardcore, so happy to be on the show. Big fan, lot to talk about, so happy to join you today.
No, definitely. We brought Megan because we always like to have, really good folks on Talking Head Show. Today we're going to touch on, obviously, the big news. This Wednesday, the Nevada State Athletic Commission reported that Alistair Overeem, as a result of the performance-enhancing drug test that they administered, tested positive for testosterone. This has thrown the whole event into chaos, Meg. Dana White has talked about we're still going to have a title fight. We're not going to scrap Cain Velasquez, Frank Mir. But what are your thoughts on this? First off, Meg, much of a surprise that this happened with Overeem, and what do you think the UFC's next move is from here? Just about a month and a half out from what was going to be a big title fight between Overeem and Dos Santos.
Yeah, I'm only surprised that he got caught. I think it was pretty dumb. I agree with Dana White being so angry about it. As you know, his levels were 2 times what's expected, and I know there's a lot of blogging out there about, is the levels too strict for the MMA? But truth be told, he comes in at double the amount. He certainly looks different as a person. If you look at him side by side, he's, a caricature of his former self. I think it's a pity. I think it's a real ripoff to Dos Santos, and I think they're stuck now. As you said, Frank's taken. He's spoken for as a fight. I think they're stretching to figure out who could possibly fill the bout. Could it be Fabricio? People have seen them fight 3 years ago. Maybe that's something worth seeing. But I think they're in a real bind now because of this stupid move by him.
And it's interesting too because there's a lot of things you can do in the UFC, but one of the last things you want to do is leave Uncle Dana hanging. And that's how you get in his good graces, by being a willing last-minute substitute. I mean, there's guys, like, Danny Castillo's been a late sub. He'll always have a place in the UFC. Matt Brown will fight anybody. Chris Lytle was like that. But when you leave him hanging, like Nate Marquardt did with another, testosterone related issue, you can kind of get in the doghouse for a while. And this was a big card, Meg. This was 5 heavyweight fights. You had the big title heavyweight title showdown between him and Overeem. And so now, we've got our options. Is it Fabricio Verdum and him again? Personally, I think Dan Henderson's almost kind of interesting because it's nothing to lose. Does Henderson have a chance to beat Dos Santos if they throw him in there?
I think he's got limited time to get to weight. So I think people would like to see it, but I think the challenge is what can he do in 7 weeks with weight? I think I'd love to see him. I mean, he's always a fan favorite. He certainly would be doing Dana a big favor.
Big favor.
And I don't A big favor. And I don't think there's anyone else to really watch, to be quite frank. I mean, I think a lot of, no pun intended, I think people think it's going to be Frank, but people have been pretty adamant that no, he's going to stay with Velasquez. So Henderson would be interesting. I think that would be my pick for someone I'd want to see.
No, and I agree too. And I really don't think, throwing Fabricio Verdum in there is just kind of a lose-lose. I mean, Dos Santos blew him out, back when Dos Santos was a nobody, and it almost doesn't prove anything. But at the same time, I wanted to circle back on the testing issues, because when they did this surprise testing at the press conference for the event, my first thought was, oh my Lord. Because we all know that, performance-enhancing drugs are a big problem in MMA. They're prevalent. They're everywhere. Everyone had seen Overeem, as you said, turn into a caricature. He was pretty much like a Xerox copy, a larger version of his light heavyweight self, and there was all this nonsense about how he'd taken horse meat and, he'd done this and that. I mean, let's be honest. The guy put on, let's say he was walking on at 225 at light heavy. He put on a solid 40 pounds of steel, and the rumors were out there. And when they did that surprise testing, that was my first thought was, wow, Overeem's going to pop positive. I didn't say it. I'm not on the record as saying it, but that's what everyone was thinking. Do you think this could be a wave of the future with events coming down the pike, kind of this actual surprise testing?
It's the only way to test because listen, right now the way Nevada, if you do a regular scripted test or a surprise test, right now most fighters are given 3 months advance to test.
Right.
So you could basically gut it out of your system in 3 months. And a surprise test, it's really, really hard to do. And if you're using and you're usually using regularly, you're going to get it on a surprise test. In fact, he might have been higher. He might have been preparing to know that he was going to get popped with a test and came in where he did. But I think it's up to the UFC to change what they do. I know Dana's very adamant to say, hey, listen, it's up to the commission. I can't afford to do this. We have over 375 fighters. We can't follow them around. And I think
Right.
what you've seen is some of the people come forward to say, it'll be a few $1,000,000 a year to test, and you really don't have to test everybody. I think if you do it random and it is a surprise, you're going to catch more and more people. But Jason, to be honest, most importantly, he has to have a zero tolerance policy. You can't see people test positive and then be given kind of put out to pasture for a year and
Right.
re-show back up. I mean, that's not going to send a message to the younger fighters that you can continue this way.
Right. And see, and that's the most important thing is I've heard people have a very sort of laissez-faire attitude about, well, everyone's on it and it's okay. And the thing I always think about is the athlete like Jeremy Horn that wants to,
Yeah.
that wants to compete in mixed martial arts or any sport and doesn't want to have to do it to stay even. And I think a really stringent kind of random that will send enough of a message along with the really strict no tolerance policy that will make more and more people decide not to do it because I think it's obvious and I will make a prediction the more kinds of tests we have like this in mixed martial arts, it will be just like in baseball when home run numbers started plummeting, is you will see heavyweights get smaller and smaller. You will absolutely see that. The more they do this, all of a sudden those guys that were 240 and are now 260, they'll be back to 240, maybe even 230. And I just think it's really good in terms of protecting the integrity of the sport and the people that want to be clean. So, obviously a tough blow for the event, but I think it really is it is a wake-up call for the sport that this test, basically KO'd this big main event the way it did. So one of the other reasons we brought you on here, in addition to your likability and your great knowledge of the sport, Meg, is we want to talk about women's mixed martial arts. It's always kind of been kind of out there on the periphery of the sport. There's the startup of the new promotion Invictus, which is going along. Tell us a little bit about Invictus and kind of the background and what they're trying to do for women's MMA.
Yeah, so it's Invicta, which is funny.
Invicta, there you go.
I know Invictus was a very good movie and it's very tempting. So Invicta, I think, is yet another good attempt to come out with a women's only event. And I think if you look at Knapp and the girls, Shannon Knapp, one of the co-founders, they really put a good set of women together for the April 28th event in Kansas City. And what's appealing to me is when I did a quick analysis of the top fighters at that event, 70% of their combined wins were done via submission. So this is not going to be the old take it in the
Sloppy.
face. Yeah. Sloppy slugfest, and then no one wants to see a girl look like that. That's just the sad reality of it. And I was in Columbus for the Rowdy Misha Tate fight. Everyone in the box I was in was on their feet, jumping up and down, screaming. It literally was a changing moment in the event of the night. And I think that's because for the first time in a long time, the women have a ground game. It's kind of like where MMA was 10 years ago. And you saw, Royce Gracie enter the ring and people suddenly said, wow, somebody on the ground could beat somebody that is just slugging it away. And I think many of us who follow women's MMA thought, wow, this is a shot for women maybe to have something on pay-per-view. So my prediction is Invicta will be well attended. In fact, Cyborg, who's also out on a steroid problem, is supposedly supposed to be there in the fans. She's going to watch. So that'll be interesting. And I think what will come of this is you will get a Kira Gracie to come into the MMA and take on a Ronda Rousey. And I think you'll see a lot of women who are Olympic medalists in judo, wrestling, other forms of ground game come forward and take it to the next level. So I am really, really excited about Invicta just because I think the women there have done a nice job to put on 12 solid fights, all weight categories. And if you start dipping down into my weight, into 110, you get a lot of competitors coming out. Not that I'll compete, but you get a lot of people coming out for the fight.
Well, and I watched, I covered boxing for a long time, and I was really into it in the mid to late 90s, when they were trying to build up Christy Martin and Lucia Riker. And it's kind of a self fulfilling prophecy. Like, if the money's there, then you'll get the Olympians and the talent base. But until it's there and you don't have enough people, then you don't have enough women and enough weight classes. And one of the fighters I've known for a long time, Erin Tohill, she was an incredibly talented fighter, but she couldn't find women her size to compete against, and there just wasn't enough matchups. And so it's kind of a self-fulfilling deal. But I think one of the things I really enjoyed about the Rousey Tate fight, it was the first time in a long time I was watching a women's MMA fight, and I didn't realize I was watching women's MMA.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God, Tate's doing this, Rousey's going for this. Look at that submission, and I was excited, and I was in the moment in a fight as opposed to, this girl's getting punched in the face because her stand-up's a little weak or she's outmatched here. I was just like, this is a heck of a fight. So what does Invicta need to do in terms of brand itself or to grab the public's imagination? Because the MMA world is kind of it's ever more dominated by the UFC. They're on Fox. They're on every other channel. How do they carve out their niche, and what do they need to do to carve out that niche?
Yeah, I think unfortunately they're going to need a headline fight to carve out their niche. They're going to need to put up Rousey Tate type of fights where you just said what you said. You forgot you were watching a woman's sport. And I think if people continue to see 12 bouts of slugfest and women bleeding everywhere, no one wants to watch it. They know it. I mean, women know it. And, a lot of people have been upset about the sexism that, Amisha is so good looking and Rhonda, is going to be off like Gina off to a movie. But, those girls have no problem with the way they look. They said, there's nothing wrong. I don't need to look like a man. I can fight really well. It's down to the talent. I'm an Olympic judo competitor. So I think what Invicta needs to do is to get that level of fighters involved. And I think they will. I think it's a pity. I think Cyborg probably would have been able to fight. Had she not been out, she probably would have taken on someone else, or maybe there would have been a mix with Sarah Kaufman and Misha and Rhonda and a different permutation of fighters. So I think Invicta needs to repeat it. I think the first one in Kansas City has to go well.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have some good fights, some good ground games, a nice mix. These things can't go quick. And then I think they need to get some headliners. And I think they'll do it. I think they're going to go for it big.
No, and that's always been a thing we've seen with every upstart promotions. You really need that headliner, somebody to capture the public's imagination. And, we will definitely follow Invicta very closely in the coming weeks. So, obviously, a great first show with you, Meg. Where can fans get hold of you if they have questions or want to learn more?
Of course, I'm on the Twitter world. I'm at MMA Meg at Twitter, so that's where you can find me. And I write for a bunch of folks and blog and conduct a lot of fighting interviews, so you can find me there. And this was a blast. This was real.
Absolutely. We will follow up again. And once again, we wanted to thank Meg May for joining us on MMA Talking Heads. I'm Jason Probst, and we will see you next time on... Let's hear it. MMA Talking Heads. That was your cue.
Oh, that's you. MMA Talking Heads.
That's
Don't
right.
miss it. Don't go anywhere.
Exactly. It's way more gangster when you do it. We'll see you next time, folks.
See you next time.